The Old Benoni defense, which comes after pawn to c5, is a really good option for many reasons. First of all, you attack white's center pawn with a flank pawn. So if they happen to capture, you will win this pawn back, and then you'll have a center pawn majority, which is crucial in the opening. You also stay out of all sorts of London, Catalan, and Queen's Gambit theory and stuff, and that's what you would get when you play a move like d5. So by playing c5, you completely avoid all of that stuff. And the Old Benoni is also a really fun opening. So anyways, here, white has a few options. They can either push, take, or defend some other way. So first, if they decide to capture, this is where you'll have some fun. You will now play e6, and you're gonna win this pawn back, no matter what they do. No matter how hard white tries to defend it after a move like b4, it just won't be enough. Because once they play b4, you can now play pawn to a5. And here, if they try to play a3, that's a terrible move because now you can capture, and this pawn cannot capture because now the rook hangs in the corner. So back here, if they try to play pawn to c3, this is also a terrible move because once you capture on b4 and they capture back, you can play the move queen to f6. And see this rook in the corner? It is completely trapped. If they try to, they'll have to play a move like knight to c3, completely giving away their knight. And this is the only move that saves the rook, because after queen takes, bishop has to block. You can just drop your queen back, and now you are up a knight for a pawn, and none of those options work for white very clearly. One last option back here, if they try to play a move like bishop to e3. This is also a bad move because after knight a6, there is no way to defend this pawn. Once they develop, you can take, and here you can get a very easy d5 push in, and their bishop is just going to be stuck on this e-file blocking the e-pawn, and that's going to make development quite awkward for white. Okay, so now that we know that accepting the pawn isn't really a great option for white, they can now either push or defend. First, if they try to defend with a knight, it's kind of a questionable move because after take, we can now get a very easy d5 push in. And here, some of the most common moves are like g3, and g3 just lets us have the whole entire center, so I mean, that's not that good for white. And if they try like knight c3, which is another pretty common move, this is also bad because after e5 and the knight slides over to f3, we can now push d4. And here there's a pretty nice trap because for white, e5 seems like a totally free pawn, and it at first glance it, totally does, but white falls into a total complete trap here. Here you actually do not want to capture this knight because after you take, they can trade off the queens and they get this fork, so that's really bad for you. Instead, you want to be patient and just play a move bishop to e6. What this move does is it defends this pawn, and the knight is now forced to move. So once the knight moves, let's say bishop to e4, you now have this check, queen to a5, and now it picks up this knight on e5. So after they block, you can now pick up this knight, and you are doing excellent here. So if white decides not to fall into that trap, and they play a move like knight to e4, which is by very far the most common move, this walks right into f5. And now, if the knight comes back to g3, you can now play f4, and the knights are just getting absolutely kicked around. This is such a bad position for white, because now you can get bishop f5, attack the knight with a tempo, queen d3 has to come in, now you can go queen d5, and I mean, this is a very bad position for white. Sure, you are not up any material, but you have insane center control, and this knight is getting attacked a lot. It's also pinned to the queen, so this is very bad for white. Okay, so back here, if white decides to play pawn to c3, defending the pawn this way, we can now just play e6. This move opens up our bishop to defend this pawn, so if they do capture, we can now just capture with the tempo. This also applies if they accept our gambit too earlier. So they most likely will not take. They'll probably just develop the knight instead. We can now push d5 and get a very nice center control. I mean, this is very good for us. We have two nice pawns in the center. If they go like bishop to f4, we can just continue to develop. This is a pretty good position for both colors. It's just about dead even. They go like bishop to d3, we can get our bishop out to d6, they'll likely drop back. Now we can castle, they'll castle. And here we can go b6, looking to fianchetto this bad bishop. That is our main weakness in this sideline because this bishop is pretty bad. We can look to fianchetto it this way. Or another move you could do is you could move the rook in, and then you can look to get a pawn break this way, and then get the bishop out this way. So that is how you deal with your bad white-colored bishop. So lastly, white's most common option is pawn to d5. After they play this, we have a couple different options, but first we will play pawn to e6. This move immediately challenges white's d-pawn, and they can either defend or take. First, if they defend with a move like c4, which is their most common option, we will just trade down and then get a d6 push-in, clamping down on the setter. After a move like knight to c3, we can push g6, which here we are getting ready to fianchetto our bishop. This is very powerful because this dark squared bishop on this diagonal pairs very, very well with our pawns right here, because these pawns control these dark squares very well, and then our bishop is coming in to strengthen this control. So we have a very great control of the dark squares on the board right now. If they play a move like pawn to e4, we can now just continue to develop bishop e2, castle, castle, and then we can get bishop g4 pin in, looking to take this knight, and then removing in another defender of these dark squares. Here we can always trade. Another great option is to go a6, and this is preparing b5 push, and we can rapidly expand on the queen side with this move. It also stops the knight from coming in, which isn't really much of a threat, but I mean, it's always good to still stop the knight from going to a square like that. If they go a4, we can just go knight d7, and we are chilling here. This is a pretty good spot for both colors. Sure, this knight is a little cramped, but it's looking to reroute to e5. We can also go rook e8 to strengthen this. We can always trade down the knight too, and then improve this knight by going here. So another option for black in this position is to go pawn to g6. And this position largely transposes into the other one. It's very similar, but you do end up keeping your e-pawn, and you get a fianchettoed bishop much quicker. So if you like more closed games, and if you like having your e-pawn, I would highly recommend this over the other variation. Alright, so the last variation here I will cover, in a very aggressive one for black, is knight to f6. And once they'll most likely play pawn to c4, we can play b5. And this is known as the Benko Gambit. I am not familiar with it whatsoever, so I'm not going to really go into it too much. But for those Benko Gambit players out there, just know this setup is right here, and this is a very easy entry to it. Alright, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you all next time.